Hello everyone, welcome back. This is a story from Her Silent Revenge, and it has taken a turn you absolutely didn't expect. Let's begin.
At Christmas dinner, my older sister raised her glass and declared with a thin, mocking smile, "For 6 years, my little sister has always been my right hand." Laughter spread around the table. 14 guests clinked their glasses, looking at me with a blend of pity and quiet embarrassment, as if my place had always been behind her and always would be. She thought it was nothing more than a harmless joke, but in that very moment, I did something no one expected. And from there, everything began to change. I'm so grateful you're here. Quick question before we start. Where are you joining me from? Comment your location below so we can connect. Just a note, this story includes fictionalized elements added for entertainment and education. If it resembles real names or settings, that's purely coincidental. But trust me, the message I'm sharing is absolutely worth hearing. My younger sister fired me on a Tuesday, 4:15 in the afternoon, right between the lunch rush and dinner prep. 6 years I'd worked at Eatwell. 6 years of 70-hour weeks, burns striping my forearms, and recipes she'd claimed as her own. The firing took 3 minutes. She never looked at me once. That night, I had $2,263 in my bank account and nowhere to go. But let me back up. Let me tell you how it started. At 4:10, I was prepping heirloom tomato salad in the kitchen, slicing Cherokee purples into thick rounds that bled juice all over the cutting board. The kitchen smelled like thyme and duck fat, and Tuesday afternoons at Etoile were usually calm, a pocket of quiet before the evening storm. I remember thinking I'd call my parents after shift, tell them about the new dish I'd been working on, a play on my grandmother's mole that I'd been testing for weeks. Then Kay Williams, our restaurant manager, pushed through the swing door. She was a woman in her late 40s with reading glasses perpetually perched on her head, and she didn't meet my eyes when she said, "May Ann wants to see you in her office." Now, something in her voice made my stomach drop. I set down my knife and walked through the kitchen past Marcus, a 29-year-old line cook with a sleeve of tattoos and a good heart who glanced up at me with a look I couldn't read. Anne's office sat at the back of the restaurant, a cramped room with an oak desk and a filing cabinet that never quite closed. The door was already open. My sister didn't stand when I walked in. She sat behind her desk, hands folded on top of a single sheet of paper, wearing her chef's whites, immaculate as always. Her dark hair pulled back tight, no warmth in her face. Kay stepped in behind me and closed the door, standing with her back against it like a bailiff. It was 4:15 exactly when Anne slid the paper across the desk and said, "May, I'm letting you go. Your performance hasn't met expectations. Here's your termination letter and final paycheck." I stared at the paper. My name, May Elizabeth Sullivan, printed in a cold corporate font. Performance, I managed. Marcus just told me yesterday the mole duck was the best thing he's tasted in. Anne cut me off. "The decision's been made. Kay will collect your badge and keys." I looked at the paper again. There was a date in the corner, yesterday's date, May 17th. She'd signed this yesterday, planned it, had it printed and ready before I ever walked into this room. This is about Memoria de Mama, isn't it? The words came out sharper than I intended. This is about Alexander Monroe. But Anne stood still, not looking at me. This is about you not being a good fit for Etoile's new direction. Kay stepped forward, hand outstretched, waiting. I looked down at the termination letter again, read the language. Failure to meet performance standards. Effective immediately. Legal. Sterile. Printed yesterday. Yesterday, I'd been standing at this same stove laughing with Marcus about how the critic from the Charleston Post and Courier had called the mole duck transcendent. Yesterday, I'd thought I was safe. Thought the 6 years I'd given this place, the late nights, the holidays I'd skipped the menu items I'd developed that Anne put her name on meant something. I'd been wrong. The dish was mine, I said quietly. My hands were shaking. "You know that dish was mine." Anne finally looked at me. Her eyes were flat, empty. "Everything you create in this kitchen belongs to Etoile, belongs to me. If you have a problem with that, you should have read your contract more carefully." I wanted to scream, wanted to flip the desk, wanted to ask her when she'd become this person. But I didn't. I just stood there holding a piece of paper that erased 6 years in 3 paragraphs. By 4:22, I was back in the kitchen walking to my locker in a haze. Marcus was at his station prepping onions. He saw my face and stopped mid-cut. May? I didn't answer. Just pulled out my personal chef's knife, a 10-inch Wusthof my grandmother had given me when I graduated culinary school, my handwritten recipe notebook, and the apron with my name embroidered on the chest pocket, a gift from Marcus 2 Christmases ago. Kay stood behind me silent. I handed her my badge, my keys. She took them without a word. Marcus stepped into my path as I turned to leave. "What happened?" he asked. "She fired me," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. Flat. Distant. Why? I shook my head. Couldn't explain it. Didn't have the words yet. Marcus's eyes went red and he opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, wanted to fix it. But what could he say? What could anyone say? I walked out the back door into the Charleston heat. At 4:35, I sat in my 2015 Honda Civic with the windows up and the AC broken. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Divi tukstoshi divi, simti seshdesmit, $3.40 septini centi. Rent was due next week, $1,485. Car payment, $387. Groceries, gas, insurance. I did the math in my head. Did it twice. 3 times. It didn't add up. I couldn't make it add up. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Anne said you left your job. Hope you have a plan." Not "Are you okay?" Not "What happened?" Not even a phone call. Just 8 words. Cold. Disappointed. Assuming I'd done something wrong. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then I looked up. Through the windshield, I could see the back of Etoile the blue dumpster. The kitchen door, Marcus, standing outside smoking a cigarette, staring at his phone like he didn't know what to do either. 6 years, 70-hour weeks, burns on my arms, recipes stolen. And it ended here in a hot car that smelled like old French fries with $2,263 and a text message from a mother who didn't ask if I was okay. And then I remembered something Anne had said once months before she fired me, something I should have paid attention to. It was a staff meeting in February. We were reviewing the spring menu. One of the line cooks, a young woman named Olivia, had suggested a modification to one of my dishes. A smart modification, actually. Before I could respond, Anne cut in. "Olivia, I appreciate the input, but May works for me. Her ideas work for me because I've trained her to think the way I do. That's how kitchens function. There's one vision, mine." She smiled when she said it. Everyone laughed nervously. I didn't laugh. I saw Olivia's face fall, saw her shrink into herself, and I thought that's not right. But I didn't say anything. I never said anything. Sitting in my car that afternoon, I finally understood. Anne hadn't just fired me. She'd been preparing to erase me for months, maybe years, every time she took credit for my work, every time she positioned herself as the sole creator, every time she reminded everyone, including me, that I was just an employee, just her right hand. She'd been building a narrative. And when I created something she couldn't control, couldn't claim, couldn't understand memoria de mama, I became a liability. I started the car. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't sit there anymore, staring at the place that had consumed 6 years of my life and given me nothing in return but a termination letter and $22.63. I drove to my apartment in North Charleston, 1 bedroom, 700 square feet, beige carpet. A kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, but it was mine. I unlocked the door, walked inside, set my chef's knife and notebook on the counter, and stood in the middle of the living room trying to figure out what came next. My phone buzzed again, another text, this time from Anne. "Left some of your stuff in the office. Stop by tomorrow to pick it up. Come before 10 a.m. Don't make this awkward." I stared at the message. Don't make this awkward, as if I was the one making it difficult. As if she hadn't just destroyed my career, my reputation, and my livelihood in 3 minutes without ever looking me in the eye. I didn't respond. I turned off my phone, sat on the couch, and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. By the time the sun set, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to beg Anne for an explanation. I wasn't going to beg my parents for money. I wasn't going to beg anyone for anything. I was going to figure this out on my own, somehow. I just didn't know how yet. To understand why my sister fired me, you need to understand my family. And to understand my family, you need to see the wall. The living room wall in my parents' house, white colonial magnolia tree in the front yard, same doormat that says blessed, is covered in photographs. 47 frames. I counted them once on a Thanksgiving 2 years before Anne fired me. I'd come home to help Mom cook, and while she was in the kitchen basting the turkey, I stood in that living room and looked at the wall the way you'd look at evidence. 43 of the frames held pictures of Anne, her kindergarten graduation, her middle school art show, her high school prom in a silver dress, her culinary school acceptance letter framed like a diploma, even though she dropped out. Her and Mom at Etoile's soft opening arms around each other, identical smiles. There were 3 pictures of me. One from my college graduation tucked in the corner behind a lamp. One from my 8th birthday so faded you can barely see my face. One from a family beach trip where I'm half cut out of the frame, standing at the edge while Anne's in the center, sun-drenched and laughing. 3 out of 47. I was 31 years old when I finally counted. That's when I understood. It wasn't an accident, it was a choice. Mom walked through the living room while I was standing there carrying a bowl of cranberry sauce. She glanced at the wall, then at me. "We need to get more pictures of Anne's restaurant up here," she said. "The wall's looking a little empty." I stared at her. 47 frames. 43 of them Anne. And she thought it looked empty. It started early. I was 8 years old when I won the regional spelling bee. I came home with a certificate blue ribbon still pinned to my shirt, bursting to tell someone. Mom was in the living room holding Anne, who was 4 and running a fever. "Mom, I won first place," I'd said, waving the certificate. Mom glanced up, distracted. "That's great, honey. Put it on the table. I'm taking care of your sister." The certificate sat on that table for 3 weeks. Then it disappeared. I never saw it again. It never made it to the wall. When I was 16, I got accepted to the College of Charleston with a culinary scholarship, full tuition room, and board the kind of thing most kids dream about. I'd been cooking since I was 10, ever since my grandmother Rosa taught me to make tortillas from scratch in her tiny kitchen. The scholarship felt like validation, like proof that I was good at something. But that same week, Anne failed her math midterm. She was 12, crying at the dinner table, saying she'd never pass. Mom looked at me across the pot roast and said, "May, you need to help your sister study. Anne needs time. You've always been able to figure things out on your own." So I tutored Anne every night for 3 months. Algebra, geometry, fractions she should have learned in 5th grade. She retook the test and passed. Mom and Dad bought her a brand new iPad as a reward. I never got a thank you. Not from Anne. Not from them. By the time I was 23, I'd graduated from culinary school with honors. Full scholarship again. I'd worked 2 jobs to cover what the scholarship didn't dishwasher at a diner prep cook at a catering company. I was tired, but I was proud. And I was broke. I needed $2,500 to take the sommelier certification exam, something that could open doors, get me into higher-end restaurants. I asked Dad if he could loan it to me. I'd pay him back in 6 months. He'd looked uncomfortable, glanced at Mom. "Well," he'd said slowly, "we're helping Anne right now. She wants to open a restaurant. We're giving her $95,000 to get Etoile started." I'd stared at him. $95,000. "I just need $2,500, I'd said. Mom cut in. "May, you already have a degree. Anne needs a chance to build something. You understand, don't you?" I didn't get the $2,500. Anne got $95,000. 4 years later, in 2017, I was 29 and working as a sous chef at a small bistro downtown. I got an offer from another restaurant head chef, $68,000 a year, full benefits, my own kitchen. It was everything I'd been working toward. Then Anne called. "You're not actually taking that job, are you?" she'd asked. Her voice had that edge to it, the one that made me feel guilty before I even knew what I'd done wrong. "I need you, May. I don't know how to run this kitchen by myself. You'd really just leave me." I'd felt it then, the pull, the old instinct to make things easier for her. "What's the pay?" I'd asked. $48,000, she'd said. "But it's family. That's worth more than money, right?" I turned down the $68,000 job. I stayed at Etoile for 48. That was 7 years ago. 2 years later at Christmas, Mom would make that toast in front of 14 people, the one about Anne owning a restaurant while I just worked in one. The day after Anne fired me, May 19th, 2023, I called Mom. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what else to do. "Mom, I lost my job," I'd said. "I don't know what happened. I don't know what I'm gonna—" She cut me off. "Anne already told me. What did you do to make her let you go? Not, 'Are you okay?' Not, 'What can I do?' To help, just blame. Immediate, automatic." I didn't do anything," I'd said. "She took credit for my dish. She's been taking credit for years." "May," Mom said, her voice sharp, "you're 34 years old. Stop blaming your sister for your problems. You need to grow up." She hung up. I sat in my apartment that night, the one bedroom I could barely afford, and opened Facebook. I don't know why. Maybe I was looking for proof that I existed, that I mattered to someone. I scrolled through Mom's profile. 47 posts about Anne in the last 6 months. Pictures of her at Etoile. Anne accepting a Charleston's Best New Chef award. Anne on a local morning show talking about her self-made success. Anne. I counted the posts about me, kept scrolling, kept looking. 5 years of posts, 0 mentions, 0 photos, 0 proof I was her daughter. Then I opened my email, started searching. Found one from 2017, subject line, "For Anne's future." It was from Dad to Mom, CCing Anne. The body of the email was short. "Transferred $40,000 to Anne's account for Etoile expansion. She's worked so hard. Let's make sure she has what she needs." 40,000. Indivi Tukstoshi Septine Padsmit. 4 years after they'd given her 95,000 to open the place. I stared at the screen, did the math. That was $135,000 total. And Anne always said she'd built Etoile from scratch, self-made, pulled herself up, worked for everything she had. I opened another email, then another. There were more. 5,000 here, 8,000 there. I stopped counting after 150,000. My sister hadn't built Etoile alone. She'd built it with my parents' money, and she'd built it on the lie that I wasn't good enough to deserve the same. I closed the laptop, sat in the dark, and for the first time in 34 years, I let myself think the thing I'd never let myself think before. They didn't see me. They never had. And maybe they never would. I gave Anne 6 years, 2,190 days, 70-hour weeks, 17 burns, 4 kitchen fires, and she took credit for everything. I started at Etoile in May 2017. I was 29. Anne had been running the place for 4 years, 8 stations, a dining room that seated 42, her name on the door. She'd asked me to come work for her and I'd said yes, turned down a head chef position paying $68,000 a year to take 48 at hers. Because she was my sister, because she said she needed me. The first month I created a hibiscus gastrique, a sweet and sour reduction made from dried hibiscus flowers, apple cider vinegar, and honey. I'd been testing it for weeks, pairing it with duck confit. Anne tried it one afternoon during prep. "May, this is incredible," she'd said. "Can you teach me how to make it?" I smiled, wrote down the recipe, handed it to her. 3 weeks later, I saw her Instagram post, 47,000 followers at the time. The caption read, "My new signature gastrique took me months to perfect Chef Anne Etoile Charleston." My recipe, her name. I stared at my phone in the walk-in freezer. I thought about saying something, but Kay Williams, our restaurant manager, saw me looking at Anne's phone. She shook her head once, a warning. I understood. In November 2018, a food blogger named Sarah came to Etoile. 200,000 followers specialized in Southern cuisine. Anne was desperate to impress her. That night, I made deconstructed shrimp and grits, crispy hominy cakes, seared shrimp with brown butter emulsion microgreens and lemon zest. Sarah took one bite. "This is incredible," she'd said to Anne. "Whose idea was this?" Anne didn't hesitate. "Mine. I wanted to reinvent Southern classics." I was standing in the kitchen 10 feet away, watching through the pass. I heard every word. Marcus, a line cook in his mid-20s, was next to me. He put his hand on my shoulder. "May, you should forget it," I said. By April 2020, I'd developed a plating technique, a lemon butter gel made with agar-agar that could be piped onto a plate as a base for scallops. Anne saw me working on it during prep. "How do you make that?" she'd asked. I told her. Gelatin, lemon butter, agar-agar, ratio of 2:1 to 0.5. A month later, Charleston Magazine ran a feature, Chef Anne Sullivan's Innovative Plating Techniques Elevate Étoile. There was a photo of the scallop dish, my gel, her name. In September 2021, investors came to Étoile. They were considering funding a second location. Anne asked me to make something special, the 17-ingredient mole I'd been perfecting for 2 years. Duck confit heirloom corn puree and the mole my grandmother Rosa had taught me to make. I worked for 4 hours that night, every component perfect. The investors loved it. I heard them through the kitchen door. "Chef Sullivan, this mole is extraordinary. Is this your recipe?" "Yes," Anne said. Her voice was smooth, confident. "It took me 3 years to perfect the spice blend." Marcus told me later what she'd said. I stood at the dish pit for 2 hours that night, scrubbing sheet pans until my hands ached. By March 2022, I was breaking. It was 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. The kitchen was closed. I sat on the floor of the walk-in freezer, my back against a shelf of vegetables, and let the cold seep into my bones. Marcus found me there. "May, you okay?" "I don't know why I stay," I said. "Because you're good," he said. "And she knows it." "Then why doesn't she say it?" "Because if she says it, she has to share the spotlight." In November 2022, one of the investors, a man named David, came back to Étoile for dinner. He pulled Anne aside after his meal. Marcus overheard the conversation. "Anne, your sous chef, she's incredibly talented. Have you thought about promoting her to co-executive chef?" Anne smiled. That sweet practice smile. "May's wonderful, but she's more comfortable in a support role. She doesn't have the vision for leadership," Marcus told me later. I was standing at my station cutting onions, tears streaming down my face. Kay Williams walked past. "May, you should leave." "I can't," I said. "She's my sister." "That's exactly why you should." That night I opened the Notes app on my phone. I made a list. Every dish Anne had claimed as her own. Hibiscus gastrique, crispy hominy cakes, lemon butter gel plating, smoked paprika aioli, 17-ingredient mole. 8 others. Smaller things. A vinaigrette here, a garnish there. 13 recipes total, 13 pieces of work I'd created that had Anne's name on them. Then in February 2023, I made a decision. I created one more dish, a dish that mattered more than any of the others. I called it Memoria de Mama, Memory of Mother. It was my grandmother's mole 17 ingredients, 45 minutes of stirring every spice a prayer. I made it on a slow Tuesday night, tested it, perfected it, and I didn't tell Anne. For the first time in 6 years, I kept a recipe to myself. I wrote it down in a notebook I kept in my locker. I locked the notebook away, and I didn't say a word. 3 months later, she'd fire me. But I'd have that dish, and she'd never know how I made it, not until it was too late. I created Memoria de Mama on a slow Tuesday in February. It wasn't supposed to be revolutionary, it was supposed to be a love letter. Valentine's Day 2023. The dining room at Étoile was packed, couples leaning over candlelight, Anne working the room with her camera-ready smile, posting Instagram stories every 15 minutes. I stayed in the kitchen, plating desserts, sending out dish after dish with my name nowhere on them. At 8:45, I glanced through the pass and saw them. An elderly couple at table 9. The woman had white hair pinned with a silver clasp. She was feeding him cutting duck, lifting the fork to his mouth. He closed his eyes, nodded, reached for her hand. And just like that, I was 10 years old again in my grandmother Rosa's kitchen. She was teaching me to make mole poblano. 7 generations of her family had made that sauce. She'd told me every ingredient was a prayer. She died in 2018. I still missed her every day. At 9:15, Anne breezed in, pulling off her apron. "May lock up tonight. I have plans." She didn't wait for an answer. By 9:20, it was just me and Marcus. He lingered by the door. "You need help closing." I looked at him, at the empty kitchen. "Actually, yeah, I want to try something." At 9:30, I went to my locker and pulled out a small cloth bag. Inside were 17 ingredients I'd been saving. I brought them back to the kitchen. Marcus was waiting. I set the bag on the counter. "What is that?" he asked. "A love letter," I said. I started laying out ingredients. Chile ancho, dried, smoky, rust-colored; Chile pasilla, earthy dark; Chile mulatto, sweet chocolatey; Mexican cinnamon bark, fragrant and thin; 3 whole cloves; allspice berries; black peppercorns toasted until they smelled like campfire; cumin seeds, coriander seeds; sesame seeds all toasted; raw cacao, 2 ounces, bitter and dense; Mexican chocolate tablet, raisins, fire-roasted tomatoes, charred onion; 7 cloves of roasted garlic; chicken stock I'd made 2 days ago; 17 ingredients. My grandmother used to say each one was a prayer. Marcus watched me measure toast grind, handed me the mortar and pestle when I needed it. I pulled duck legs from the fat 48 hours curing in duck fat thyme and garlic. The skin was golden, the meat tender. I deboned them carefully. Then I started the mole. I toasted the dried chilies in a hot pan until they puffed and blistered. Added the spices, cacao, chocolate, raisins, tomatoes, onion, garlic. Blended everything with the stock until it was thick and glossy and black as ink. Then I poured it into a pot and started stirring. 45 minutes, clockwise, never stopping. Marcus leaned against the counter. "Why clockwise?" I didn't look up. My grandmother said clockwise brings peace, counterclockwise brings change. "Oh, which one do you want?" I thought about 6 years at Etoile, every recipe I'd given away, every time I'd stayed silent. "I don't know yet," I said. By 11:20, the mole was ready. I tasted it, closed my eyes. It tasted like my grandmother's kitchen, like Sunday afternoons when I was small. I started plating. Heirloom corn puree, soft yellow, sweet. The duck confit skin crisped under the broiler. The mole, dark and glossy, pooled around the duck. Dots of hibiscus gas-streaked the sauce I'd made in 2017, the one Anne had claimed. Edible flowers, toasted sesame seeds. I stepped back. It was beautiful. I took a photo on my phone, saved it in a folder labeled "For Me." I didn't post it. It was mine. At 11:35, I heard a voice from the dining room. "Is anyone still here?" Mrs. Delilah Grant was still at table 12, a book open in front of her. She was 70-something, a regular who came in twice a week, always stayed late reading. "Mrs. Grant, we're closed." "I know, honey, but I smelled something incredible." "What are you making?" I hesitated. Then I plated a portion and brought it out. "It's something new. Would you mind trying it?" She looked at the plate. "You made this." "Yes, ma'am." She picked up her fork, cut a piece of duck, dragged it through the mole, took a bite. She closed her eyes, and then she started crying. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice shaking. "This tastes like my mother's kitchen. How did you—" "I was thinking about my grandmother when I made it." She reached across the table, took my hand. "This is magic, child. Don't let anyone take this from you." I went back to the kitchen. Marcus was cleaning up. He handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it. In his handwriting, "May write down the recipe. Hide it, don't tell Anne." I looked at him. "Why?" "Because this time," he said, "it's yours." I went to my locker, pulled out my personal recipe notebook, the one I kept locked away, and I wrote it down. Every ingredient, every ratio, every step. Then I locked it back in my locker. I didn't tell Anne. For the first time in 6 years, I kept something for myself. 3 weeks later, on March 7th, Anne came into the kitchen with her phone smiling. "May Alexander Monroe just made a reservation for tonight. The food critic from the Charleston Post and Courier. This is huge." She looked at me. "Make the mole duck, that special one you've been working on." I froze. "What?" "The mole duck. I saw Mrs. Grant raving about it on her Facebook page. She tagged Etoile, said it was the best thing she'd ever tasted." My hands went cold. I didn't. "May just make the dish." She walked away. I stood there, Marcus was across the kitchen. He looked at me, mouthed the words, "She knows." Alexander Monroe walked into Etoile on a Wednesday night. By Thursday morning, my dish was in the Charleston Post and Courier. By Friday, my sister had stolen it. It was March 7th, a slow Wednesday. The dining room was about 90% full, 38 tables, candlelight, soft jazz playing through the speakers. I was at my station in the kitchen prepping for the evening rush when Kay Williams came through the door. Her face was tight. She walked straight to Anne. "Alexander Monroe," she said quietly. "Table 7. Anne's eyes lit up. Alexander Monroe was the food critic in Charleston. 38 years old, 15 years in the industry, a reputation for being tough but fair. If he wrote about you, people listened. "Okay," Anne said. She turned to me. "May whatever he orders make the mole duck." I looked up. "But it's not on the menu." "I know. It'll be a chef's surprise. Just make it." At 7:15, Alexander ordered. Kay came back to the kitchen with the ticket. "Chef's choice," she said. "Whatever you're most proud of." Anne looked at me, nodded. I started working. Pulled the duck confit I'd prepped that morning, 48 hours in duck fat, exactly like I'd done on Valentine's. Toasted the dried chilies, ground the spices, started the mole. 45 minutes of stirring clockwise, every muscle in my shoulders burning. Marcus was next to me, helping with the plating. Anne stood at the expediting station watching me. She didn't say a word, just watched. Every step, every ingredient, every move. At 8:10, the dish was ready. I plated it the same way I had for Mrs. Grant. Corn puree, duck confit, mole glossy and dark, hibiscus gastrique dots, edible flowers, sesame seeds. Kay picked up the plate. Anne followed her out. I watched through the pass as they approached table 7. Alexander Monroe was in his late 30s, wearing a button-down and blazer, a notebook open next to his water glass. He looked up when Kay set the plate down. Anne stopped beside the table, smiled. "Mr. Monroe," she said, her voice warm and practiced. "This is tonight's special. Memoria de Mama, a 17-ingredient mole poblano. I've spent 18 months perfecting this dish." I was standing in the kitchen 10 feet away. I heard every word. My hands went cold. Marcus was next to me. "May, I heard," I said. Alexander picked up his fork, cut into the duck, dragged it through the mole, took a bite, closed his eyes, chewed slowly. Then he opened his notebook, started writing. He looked up at Anne. "This is extraordinary," he said. "Can I ask you about it?" Anne sat down. I'd never seen her sit at a table with a guest before. Chefs didn't do that, but she did. "Of course," she said. "The complexity here is remarkable," Alexander said. "How many ingredients did you say?" 17, Anne said. "Each one matters. I learned the recipe from my grandmother. She was from Mexico. She taught me that every ingredient is a prayer. I felt like I'd been slapped. My grandmother Rosa was from Mexico. My grandmother, not Anne's. Anne's grandmother, our father's mother, was from Ohio. She'd never made mole in her life. Anne was lying, sitting 5 feet from me, lying to a food critic, and I was standing in the kitchen holding a spatula doing nothing. Marcus grabbed my arm. "May go out there," he said. "Tell him the truth." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because she's my sister." At 8:25, Alexander finished his meal. He asked to speak with the chef. Kay started walking toward the kitchen, but Anne was already standing. "I'm right here," she said. She talked to him for another 10 minutes. I watched through the pass, watched her smile, watched her gesture with her hands, watched her lie. When Alexander finally left, Anne came back to the kitchen. Her face was glowing. "That went perfectly," she said. "I was standing at my station. My hands were shaking. You just told him the dish was yours," I said. My voice was quiet, flat. Anne stopped, looked at me. "It is mine. You didn't make it. You work for me, May. Everything you create in this kitchen belongs to Etoile, belongs to me. That's how this works." "That's not how it works." She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "You want to go out there. Tell Alexander you made the dish. Go ahead. But you'll never work in this city again. I'll make sure of it. I stared at her eyes, cold, flat, not a trace of guilt. The dish was mine, I said again. You know it was mine. I know you made it in my kitchen, Anne said, using my equipment, on my time. And now it's going to be in the paper tomorrow under my name. That's the reality. She turned and walked away. Marcus was standing next to me. He didn't say anything, just put his hand on my shoulder. I shrugged it off, went back to the line, finished service. Didn't say another word. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Marcus, a screenshot, the Charleston Post and Courier. The headline read, Chef Anne Sullivan's Memoria de Mama redefines Charleston fine dining. The article was glowing. Alexander called the dish genius. Said Anne had spent 18 months perfecting a recipe passed down from her Mexican grandmother. Said the mole was the best he'd tasted outside of Oaxaca. There was a photo, the dish, my plating, Anne's name. I stared at the screen, read the article twice, 3 times. Then I called Anne. She picked up on the first ring. You saw the article, she said. Her voice was light, happy. You don't have a Mexican grandmother, I said. No, she said, but you do. And now the whole world thinks the recipe is mine. You can't do this. I just did. She hung up. I sat on my bed, looked at the article again, thought about Mrs. Grant, about Marcus's note, about 18 months, about my grandmother Rosa who died 5 years ago and would never know her recipe was being credited to someone else. And I thought about the fact that I'd stood in that kitchen and said nothing. I'd let it happen because Anne was my sister, because I didn't want to make a scene, because I thought staying quiet was easier than fighting. I was wrong. 2 months later, she'd fire me. But in that moment, sitting on my bed staring at a newspaper article that erased me completely, I didn't know that yet. I just knew I'd lost something I couldn't get back. 72 hours after my sister fired me, I applied to 14 restaurants in Charleston. By the end of the first weekend, none of them had called back. By the end of week 3, I had $847 left in my account, rent 10 days overdue, and no idea how I'd survive June. The first 5 applications went out on Monday, May 21st. I tailored every cover letter, highlighted my 6 years at Etoile, attached letters of recommendation from culinary school. I applied to the Ordinary, Fig Husk Peninsula Grill, and Magnolia's 5 of Charleston's top kitchens. By Wednesday, 4 hadn't responded. The 5th sent a 2-line email, position filled. Best of luck. I told myself it was timing, wrong season, budget cuts, the usual reasons people don't get jobs. I applied to 3 more on Thursday, then 2 on Friday. By Saturday morning, I'd sent my resume to 11 Charleston restaurants from fine dining to casual bistros. My inbox stayed empty. Sunday night, I checked my bank account, $2,063. Rent was due in 5 days, $1,485. Car payment, $387. I had enough to cover both barely. After that, I'd have $191 for the rest of June. I sat on my couch in my North Charleston apartment and stared at the ceiling. The AC hummed. Outside, someone's dog barked. I opened Indeed.com and started searching for line cook positions. Anything. I didn't care about titles anymore. Thursday, May 25th. My phone finally rang. I was at the grocery store holding a $6 bag of pasta, debating whether I could afford it. The caller ID said, The Ordinary. My heart jumped. I answered before the second ring. May Sullivan. Yes, hi, this is May. Thomas Reed, executive chef at The Ordinary, got your application last week. Yes, thank you so much for calling. I'm really interested in... Listen, May. His voice wasn't unkind, but it wasn't warm. I'm going to be straight with you. I got a call 3 days ago. Someone didn't leave a name, said you had reliability issues. Showed up late. Missed shifts. I don't usually take anonymous calls seriously, but... He paused. I did some asking around, and I'm hearing similar things from a couple other chefs in town. I stood in the middle of aisle 4 holding pasta, unable to breathe. I've never missed a shift in 6 years, I said. My voice sounded far away. Yeah, well, he sighed. I'm sure you're talented, May, but I can't take the risk right now. I'm sorry. He hung up. I put the pasta back and left the store. That night, I Googled anonymous blacklist Charleston restaurants. Nothing useful came up. I tried Anne Sullivan Etoile Chef, and the first result was the Charleston Post and Courier Review from March. 5 stars. Redefines Charleston cuisine. I closed the laptop. By Tuesday, May 28th, I'd applied to 3 more places. Line cook positions, prep cook, anything that didn't require executive experience. One restaurant said they'd already hired someone. Another never replied. The third scheduled a phone interview for Friday and then canceled an hour before citing internal changes. I checked my account. $1,594. I'd paid rent. I had $109 left after the car payment. I did the math, $17 a day until June 30th. I could survive on rice eggs and whatever I had in the freezer. I'd done it before in culinary school. I could do it again. Thursday, June 1st, I called my father. I hadn't spoken to him since the day after I was fired when my mother told me that what happened at Etoile was between you and Anne. I didn't want to ask, but I was out of options. "Hey, Dad." "May." His voice was cautious. "How are you?" "Not great." I swallowed. "I need help. I've been applying everywhere. No one's hiring. My voice cracked. "I'm running out of money. I just need a little. $2,500. Just until I find something." Silence. "Dad, may I?" He exhaled. "Your mother and I talked about this. We think it's best if you and Anne work this out on your own. We don't want to get in the middle of it." "I'm not asking you to get in the middle. I'm asking for a loan. I'll pay you back." "I know you would, sweetheart, but we already helped Anne with the restaurant. We can't keep—" "You gave Anne $95,000. More silence. "That was different," he said finally. "That was an investment. And I'm your daughter. So is Anne." I hung up. I sat on the floor of my apartment and cried for 20 minutes. Then I opened Indeed again and started applying for dishwasher positions. By Friday, June 8th, I'd applied to 14 restaurants total. Sous chef, line cook, prep cook, assistant dishwasher. 14. I got 2 interviews. One was for a prep position at a catering company in Mount Pleasant. The manager took one look at my resume and said, "You're overqualified. You'd leave in a month." The other was for a weekend brunch line at a cafe downtown. The chef seemed interested until I mentioned Etoile. His face changed. He said he'd call. He didn't. That afternoon, I drove to the last restaurant on my list, a small family-owned Italian place in West Ashley. I didn't have an appointment. I just walked in, asked to speak to the owner, and handed him my resume. He glanced at it, then at me. "You worked at Etoile?" "Yes, sir, 6 years." He handed the resume back. "We're fully staffed, sorry." I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and cried. It was 3:15 in the afternoon. The sun was too bright. My phone buzzed. A text from Luis Morales, a friend from culinary school who worked at a hotel kitchen downtown. "Hey, heard you're looking. Just FYI, someone's saying you have a substance problem. Don't know who. Thought you should know." I stared at the screen. Then I checked my bank account. $847. Rent was due again in 20 days. My landlord had already called twice about the June 5th deadline. I was 10 days late. He'd said if I didn't pay by the 15th, he'd start eviction. I Googled Rent Assistance Charleston SC. I filled out 2 applications. I didn't qualify for either. I sat in my apartment that night and ate plain rice. I turned off the AC to save money. It was 92 degrees outside. I opened the windows. The air didn't move. At 9:30, someone knocked on my door. My stomach dropped. The landlord. I stood rehearsing an excuse and opened it. It wasn't the landlord. It was a woman in her 70s, white hair pulled into a low bun, wearing a faded blue cardigan despite the heat. She held a plate covered in foil. "You're the girl from 4B, aren't you?" she said. Her voice was soft, southern kind. "I'm June Crawford. I live in 4A right next door." She held out the plate. "I made biscuits this afternoon. Heard you crying through the wall last night. Thought you might like some." I stared at her, at the plate, at her face calm, patient, like she had all the time in the world. I thought my voice broke. "Thank you." She smiled. "You eat those tonight, honey, and tomorrow if you're free, come knock on my door. We'll talk." She turned and walked back to her apartment. I stood there holding warm biscuits foil crinkling under my fingers, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. June Crawford saved my life with buttermilk biscuits and one question: do you know how to cook for old people? The morning after she knocked on my door, I woke up with almost nothing left and no idea what to do. But I remembered what she'd said: tomorrow, if you're free, come knock on my door. At 9:30, I knocked. June opened the door wearing the same blue cardigan reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain. Her apartment smelled like coffee and lavender. She waved me in, pointed to a chair at her small kitchen table, and poured me coffee in a chipped mug that said, "World's Best Grandma." "Sit," she said. "Tell me what happened." I told her about Anne Etoile, the 14 restaurants that wouldn't hire me, my father's refusal, the $847, the rent I couldn't pay. I told her about Memoria de Mama, how my sister claimed it and fired me 2 months later. June listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set her mug down. "You're a good chef," she said. I was. She corrected. "You didn't lose your hands. You didn't lose your brain. You lost a job. That's not the same thing." She leaned forward. "I'm 73. I've got arthritis in both knees. Can't stand at the stove for more than 10 minutes. I've been eating frozen dinners for 6 months because I can't cook anymore and I'm too proud to ask for help." She paused. "So here's what I'm thinking. You need money. I need food. I'll pay you $25 a meal. You cook me dinner twice a week. Simple, soft food. Nothing fancy, just good." She smiled slightly. "You need this, and I need it too. $25 twice a week, $50 a week, $200 a month. It wasn't enough to cover rent, but it was something." "Okay," I said. "Good, start tomorrow." I cooked my first meal for June on June 18th. I had $18 to spend. I bought a whole chicken on sale, sweet potatoes, butter, and thyme. I roasted the chicken in her oven while she sat at the table and talked. I mashed the sweet potatoes with butter and brown sugar. I plated it simply: chicken mash roasted lemon. No garnish, no gel, just food. June took one bite and closed her eyes. "This tastes like someone cares," she said. I looked at her confused. "That's what good food is," she said. "It's not about technique. It's not about Michelin stars. It's about making someone feel like they matter." She took another bite. "You've got that, May. Don't forget it." A week later, June introduced me to Martha. Martha was 78, lived 2 floors down in apartment 2C, and had been in a wheelchair for 4 years after a stroke. She had no family nearby. June knocked on her door and said, "Martha, this is May. She's going to cook you dinner twice a week, $25 a meal." Martha looked at me with tired eyes. "What kind of food?" "Whatever you want," I said. "Meatloaf," she said, "with mashed potatoes. Real ones, not the box kind." I made her meatloaf the next day. She cried when she tasted it. By the end of June, I was cooking for 4 people. June Martha, a man named Elijah who'd been a high school history teacher for 37 years, and a woman named Ida who lived alone with 6 cats, $25 per meal twice a week for each, $200 a week, $800 a month. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was enough to eat, enough to hope. On July 20th, my landlord knocked. I opened the door with my heart in my throat, but he just sighed and said, "I heard you're cooking for the folks downstairs," June told me. He paused. "I'll give you until the end of August. Pay what you can now, the rest later." I paid him $1,085, everything I had after groceries. When he left, I sat on my couch and breathed for the first time in weeks. On July 28th, I brought Martha her dinner chicken pot pie, soft carrots, biscuits. She ate slowly, then reached across the table and took my hand. "I haven't had anyone sit with me like this in 8 years, she said. Her voice shook. "Not since my husband died. People forget about us when we get old. We disappear. But you," she squeezed my hand, "you see me, and that matters more than the food." I drove home that night and sat in my car crying so hard I couldn't see. Not because I was sad, because I finally understood. It wasn't about Michelin stars. It wasn't about critics or Instagram or James Beard nominations. It was about this making someone feel seen, making someone feel like they mattered. That was what my sister never understood. That was what I'd been searching for. On July 30th, I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed, Idea, not a restaurant, not fame, just meals for people who are lonely, small, intimate, real. I stared at the screen. Then I typed one more word. Mesa. Table. The place where people gather. The place where no one is invisible. I saved the note. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know if it would work. But for the first time since Anne fired me, I felt like I had a purpose. On August 30th, I used $315 I'd saved every spare cent after rent, groceries, gas to file the paperwork for Mesa LLC. I sat in my apartment, filled out the South Carolina online form, entered my debit card information, and hit submit. The confirmation screen loaded. Mesa LLC approved. I looked at it through tears, not tears of sadness, tears of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. I built Mesa in the back courtyard of a used bookstore with 18 strangers, a handwritten menu, and 0 social media. 3 days after I filed the LLC paperwork, I walked into Blue Bicycle Books on King Street, a cramped, dusty place that smelled like old paper and coffee. The owner, James Thornton, was 62, a retired English teacher with wire-rimmed glasses and ink stains on his fingers. I found him reshelving poetry in the back corner. "Excuse me," I said, "do you rent out your courtyard?" He looked at me over his glasses. "For what?" "Dinner," I said. "Small, 20 people max, once a week. I'd cook, serve, clean up. You wouldn't have to do anything." He set down the book he was holding, Pablo Neruda, I remember, and studied me for a long moment. "What's the catch?" he asked. "No catch," I said. "I just need a space, and I think your customers might like it. Community, connection, that kind of thing." He smiled slightly. "How much are you charging?" $55 a person. He thought about it. Then he said, "I'll let you use the courtyard for free the first time. If people like it, we'll talk rent." He paused. "But I want to eat there." "For free." I laughed. "Deal." The first Mesa dinner happened on September 20th. I spent the week before planning. I didn't build a website. I didn't start an Instagram account. I wrote the menu by hand on cardstock, made 20 photocopied flyers, and posted them at June's Church, the senior center, and 2 community bulletin boards downtown. The menu was simple roasted pork shoulder with Carolina gold rice heirloom tomato salad, buttermilk biscuits, peach cobbler. $55 per person, limited to 20 seats. First come, first served. By the morning of September 20th, I had 18 RSVPs. I cooked everything in my apartment the night before, pork in the oven for 6 hours, biscuits at 5 a.m., and loaded my car with folding tables, mismatched plates I'd bought at Goodwill, and mason jars for water. I set up in James's courtyard at 4 in the afternoon. String lights, wildflowers in old glass bottles, a chalkboard with the menu. At 6:30, the first guests arrived. An older couple, a woman in her 40s who came alone, a man with a notebook. By 7, all 18 seats were filled. I cooked in the bookstore's tiny back kitchen, just a hot plate and a cutting board, and plated each dish by hand. No servers, no uniforms. Just me carrying plates out to the courtyard, setting them down, smiling. Halfway through the night, Marcus appeared. Marcus, my former co-worker from Etoile the line cook, who'd always been kind. He stood at the edge of the courtyard, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain. "Hey," he said, "I saw your flyer at the coffee shop on Cannon Street. Thought you might need help." I stared at him. "You came all the way here to volunteer." He shrugged. "You used to cover my shifts when my mom was sick. Figured I owed you." I wanted to cry. Instead, I handed him an apron. After dinner, one of the guests, a woman named Claire, who'd told me she was newly divorced and eating alone most nights, came up to me with tears in her eyes. "I haven't felt this scene in 2 years," she said. "It wasn't just the food, it was this." She gestured to the courtyard, the string lights, the tables where strangers had started talking to each other. It felt like family. An older man named Michael, a widower who'd eaten in silence most of the night, stopped me on his way out. "My wife used to cook pork like this," he said quietly. "Thank you for reminding me what home tastes like." I cleaned up the courtyard until midnight. Marcus stayed to help. When we were done, he looked at me and said, "You should post about this. Instagram. People would love it." I shook my head. "If I post it online, 10,000 people will know about it. But I can only serve 20. I'd rather keep it real, keep it small." He didn't argue. He just smiled. "You're different, May. Over the next 6 weeks, I hosted 5 more pop-up dinners, not all at Blue Bicycle Books. James let me come back twice, but I wanted to move around, keep things unpredictable, keep people curious. I cooked at a community garden in West Ashley, at a yoga studio in Mount Pleasant, at an art gallery on Cannon Street. Each time 18 to 20 people, each time handwritten menus. No Instagram, no website, just flyers and word of mouth. By the end of October, I'd served 114 people. I kept a notebook with every name, every dish, every comment. Claire came to 3 dinners. Michael came to 2. A man named Terrell, who worked night shifts at the hospital, told me Mesa was the only place he felt like he could breathe. A college student named Jasmine said it reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen in Louisiana. I made $990 per dinner on average. After food costs and rent, James started charging me $100 per event. After the 3rd one, I cleared about $570 per night. It wasn't much, but it was mine. On October 20th, June called me. "May, honey," she said. "I've been talking to people. They love what you're doing. You should hire a PR person. Get some press. Charleston Magazine would eat this up." I sat on my couch, staring at the ceiling. "I don't want press, June." "Why not?" "Because the minute I get press, I'll have 500 people trying to book a table, and I can only serve 20. I don't want to scale this. I don't want investors or franchises or James Beard nominations. I just want to keep cooking for people who need it." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're a rare one, May Sullivan." 5 days later, Charleston Magazine called. A writer named Laura had heard about Mesa from a friend who'd attended the September dinner. She wanted to write a feature. I said no. "Why?" she asked, genuinely confused. "Because Mesa isn't ready for that," I said. "And maybe it never will be. If people need us, they'll find us." She tried to argue. I thanked her and hung up. That night, I got a text from Marcus. "Hey, just FYI, Anne's opening something called Étoile Privée, private dining experience. Saw it on her Instagram, $180 per person. Looks like she's copying your idea." I stared at the screen. Then I opened Instagram. I still had the app, even though I didn't post, and looked at Anne's page. 347,000 followers. A glossy photo of a candlelit table with gold flatware and orchids. The caption, "Introducing Étoile Privée, an intimate culinary experience, limited to 12 guests, $180 per person. DM to book." I turned off my phone. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I texted Marcus back. She can copy the idea, but she can't copy the heart. I didn't look at Anne's Instagram again. In 2024, I served 3,600 people, made $120,000, and never posted a single photo online. My sister posted 347 times and served 12. Mesa grew quietly. By February, I was hosting 4 pop-up dinners a week, 18 to 20 guests each time, always different locations, always handwritten menus. In March, Marcus quit Étoile. He showed up at my apartment one morning with a duffel bag and said, "I'm done working for people who don't care. If you'll hire me, I'm yours." I paid him $2,000 a month, every cent I could afford, and he never complained. By June, we'd served 2,000 people. By December, 3,600. Revenue, $198,000. Profit after food rent and Marcus's wage, $120,000. I kept every receipt in a shoebox. I didn't tell anyone the numbers. Not even June. Anne's Étoile Privée collapsed by spring. Marcus told me in April he still had friends at Étoile that she'd posted 60 Instagram photos of intimate 12-guest experiences, but had only actually hosted 3 dinners. The rest were staged. She'd hire a chef to cook, set a table with candles, and orchids, take photos, then send everyone home. Her followers loved it. Her bank account didn't. By July, Marcus said she'd quietly shut down Étoile Privée and gone back to running the main restaurant. I didn't look at her Instagram to confirm. I didn't need to. In June, I saw my father at Whole Foods. I was buying tomatoes. He was pushing a cart with a single bag of coffee. We stood in the produce section for a long, silent moment. Then he said, "May, Dad, how are you?" I looked at him, at the gray in his hair, at the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. 13 months. 13 months since he'd refused to lend me $2,500. 13 months since I'd heard his voice. I'm fine, I said. My voice was flat. No thanks to you. He flinched. May, you let Anne destroy me, I said. I wasn't yelling. I was too tired to yell. You gave her $95,000 and you wouldn't give me $2,500 when I was nearly broke and facing eviction. You chose her. You've always chosen her. He set his coffee down in the cart slowly like he was buying time. You're right, he said finally. I did. And I'm sorry. You deserved better, May. You deserved better than all of us. I picked up my tomatoes. Yeah, I said. I did. I walked away. He didn't follow. In September, I hosted my 100th Mesa dinner. I didn't plan anything special. I cooked the same menu I always did: roasted chicken summer squash, cornbread, blackberry cobbler. 20 guests at a community center in North Charleston. After dessert, a woman in her 60s named Diane raised her hand. Can I say something? She asked. I nodded. I've been coming to Mesa since March, she said. Her voice shook slightly. I've been on antidepressants for 8 years. 3 months ago, my doctor lowered my dosage. Last week, she took me off them completely. She looked around the table. It's because of this, because of you, because for the first time in 8 years, I have friends. I have people who ask how I'm doing. I don't eat alone anymore. She looked at me. You gave me my life back. I stood in the kitchen doorway holding a dish towel, trying not to cry. 20 strangers, most of whom had never met before tonight, stood up and clapped. Not for the food, for each other. In October, Southern Living published a 2-paragraph mention in their Hidden Gems of the South column. I didn't know about it until June texted me a photo of the page. Mesa, a roving Charleston pop-up, has no website, no Instagram, and no publicity team. What it does have a waiting list of 800 people and a reputation as the soul of Charleston's food scene. Chef May Sullivan cooks for 20 guests at a time in borrowed spaces, and every seat is earned by word of mouth. If you can find it, go. I read it 3 times. Then I called June. How did they even know about me? I asked. Because you're doing something that matters, she said. You can't hide that forever. In November, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. May, this is Alexander Monroe, Charleston Post and Courier. I've been trying to get a reservation at Mesa for 4 months. A friend finally got me in last week. I just wanted to say what you're doing is the most important culinary work in this city right now. Thank you. I stared at my phone for 10 minutes. Alexander Monroe, the critic who'd reviewed Anne's Memoria de Mama in 2023 and called it Redefining Charleston Cuisine. The same critic Anne had manipulated. And he was thanking me. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. On December 15th, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line. Just an attachment, a zip file labeled Sullivan Family Emails 2023 to 2024. I opened it. 19 PDF files. Emails between Anne, my mother, and my father. The date range May 19th, 2023 to November 28th, 2024. I clicked the first one. Subject, May situation, urgent. From Anne Sullivan to Carol Sullivan. Paul Sullivan. Date, May 19th, 2023, 6:47 p.m. I had to let her go today. She was becoming a liability. Now we need to make sure she doesn't work anywhere else in Charleston. I'll make some calls. Mom, can you reach out to your friends at Peninsula Grill and Fig? Just tell them she's unreliable. Dad, talk to anyone you know. We need to close every door. My hands shook. I scrolled down. 18 more emails. My mother writing to restaurant owners. My father calling in favors. Anne coordinating everything. A 14-month campaign to destroy me. I sat in the dark staring at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. Someone had sent me proof. Someone wanted me to know. And now I did. I didn't sleep that night. At 2 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table and read all 19 emails one by one. By the time the sun came up, I knew exactly how my family had destroyed me. The first email I'd already seen Anne to my parents, May 19th, 2023, 6:47 p.m. I had to let her go today. Now we need to make sure she doesn't work anywhere else in Charleston. The second was from my mother to Peninsula Grill, May 21st. May Sullivan has had reliability issues. There have also been concerns about substance abuse. My mother had accused me of substance abuse. The third was my father to FIG May 22nd. May's not a good fit, trust me. 4, 5, 6. Anne to K. Williams at Etoile. My mother to Husk. My father to 3 more restaurants. A coordinated campaign. They'd made sure I couldn't work anywhere. Email 7, September 10th, 2023. Anne to my mother. Mesa is getting attention. It makes Etoile look amateurish. Email 8, October 5th. My mother to Anne. Your father can talk to the association. He's on the board of the Charleston Culinary Association. I stopped. My father was on the board, the organization that ran the Rising Star Chef Award. Email 9, January 15th, 2024. My father to Louise Reynolds. Anna Sullivan's work at Etoile has revolutionized Charleston dining. She deserves serious consideration for Rising Star. Email 10 March 8th. My mother to my father. Make sure May isn't nominated. It'll confuse voters and hurt Anne's chances. Email 11, May 12th. Anne to my mother. If May gets nominated, it undermines everything I've built. Email 12, July 18th. My father to Anne. Louise mentioned there's buzz about Mesa. I'll handle it. They hadn't just blocked me from working. They'd tried to block me from being recognized, from existing. At 8 a.m., Marcus texted. Did Tyler ever reach out Anne's husband? He quit Etoile last month. Said he couldn't work for her anymore. Tyler, Anne's husband. I scrolled back through the emails. Email 15, November 5th. Anne to Tyler. If May wins Rising Star, I'll look like a fraud. Email 16, November 10th. Tyler to Anne. This is wrong, Anne. What your family did to her, it's wrong. Email 17, November 15th. Anne to Tyler. Stay out of this. Email 18, November 20th. Tyler to an unknown recipient. I can't do this anymore. I texted Marcus back. Tyler sent me the emails. 3 dots. Then holy shit. Email 19, November 28th. My father to Louise Reynolds. I'm recusing myself from voting. That said, Anne has a brick-and-mortar restaurant with a 5-star review. May runs pop-ups. The choice is clear. I closed my laptop. I sat in the dark for a long time. On December 17th, I called Anne. She answered on the 3rd ring. May, I have a question. On May 19th, 2023 at 6:47 p.m., you sent an email to Mom and Dad. Subject, May situation. Urgent. Do you remember? Silence. You wrote, now we need to make sure she doesn't work anywhere else in Charleston. Do you remember that? Tititi damasiti konorseni. Her breathing changed. How did you? On October 5th, 2023, Mom emailed you. She said, your father's on the board. Do you remember? May, where did you? On November 5th, 2024, you emailed Tyler. You said, if May wins Rising Star, I'll look like a fraud. Want me to keep going? I have 19. Silence. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Anne, I said. I'm not afraid of Mom or Dad. You spent 18 months trying to destroy me, and I'm still here. And now I have proof. May, please. I hung up. The next day I went to June's apartment. I showed her the emails, all 19. She read them slowly. When she finished, she looked at me. What are you going to do? Part of me wants to send these everywhere, every restaurant, every blog, every journalist. And the other part wants to wait to find the right moment. June nodded. Revenge and justice aren't the same thing, May. Revenge is about making yourself feel better. Justice is about making sure this never happens to anyone else. She leaned forward. You've built something real. Don't let them turn you bitter. Be smart. Be patient. When the time is right, tell the truth. I went home. I created a folder labeled Evidence. I saved all 19 emails. I saved Anne's fake Instagram posts. I saved the health department report from March 0 violations after an anonymous complaint. I saved receipts, menus, testimonials. Then I opened a new email. To Carol Sullivan, Paul Sullivan, Ann Sullivan subject. I know. I typed for 20 minutes. I wrote everything, every lie, every destroyed opportunity. I wrote about the $847, about the 14 rejections, about sitting in my car crying so hard I couldn't breathe. I wrote about June knocking on my door with biscuits, how that one act had saved my life when my family had tried to end it. I read it 3 times. Then I deleted it. They didn't deserve a warning. On December 20th, I got an email from Louise Reynolds, director of the Charleston Culinary Association. Subject: Rising Star Chef Award. Finalist notification. Dear May, congratulations. You've been selected as one of 2 finalists for the 2025 Rising Star Chef Award. The other finalist is Anne Sullivan of Etoile. The award will be presented at the gala on March 15th, 2025. I wanted to ask, is there any conflict of interest we should be aware of, given that you and Anne are sisters? Best, Louise. I read it twice. Then I typed, Hi, Louise, thank you. There's no conflict of interest, not a problem at all, May. I hit send. Then I laughed a bitter, hollow sound and closed my laptop. The gala was in 3 months. I had time to decide what to do. January 8th, 2025, 9:23 a.m. The email that changed everything had 7 words in the subject line. Confidential Southern Culinary Awards nomination. I was in my apartment drinking cold coffee, planning that night's Mesa pop-up. I opened the email. From Louise Reynolds, Director, Charleston Culinary Association. Subject: Confidential. Southern Culinary Awards nomination. Dear May, congratulations. You have been nominated for the 2025 Rising Star Chef Award. The ceremony will be held at Magnolia Plantation on March 15th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. black tie. You may invite 8 guests. Finalists are May Sullivan, Mesa Ann Sullivan, Etoile Chef David Heirloom, Chef Renee Thompson Low Tide. Award presentation at 8 p.m. Please confirm your attendance by January 10th. Best, Louise. I stared at the screen. 4 finalists, my name, and Anne's name 2 lines below mine. I read it again. Then I called Louise. She answered on the second ring. May, did you get the email? I did, I said. My voice sounded far away. Is this real? Absolutely. Your work with Mesa serving 3,600 people last year without any social media pure community impact caught the judges' attention. How did the judges even know about Mesa? We don't do press. One of our judges attended your pop-up anonymously last October. She wrote a 4-page nomination letter, called your work the soul of Charleston's food culture. Who was it? Confidential, but she was very moved. I paused. My sister, Anne Sullivan. She's also nominated. Louise hesitated. Yes. Are you 2 sisters? I didn't realize. Is that a problem? It's complicated. The nominations stand. You both deserve this. Will you attend? I looked at my laptop at the folder labeled Evidence still open from the night before. 19 emails. A health department report. Proof of everything Anne had done. I need to think about it, I said. Of course. Let me know by the 10th. I hung up, then I called June. June, I just got nominated for Rising Star Chef. Oh my God, May, that's the biggest award in Charleston. Anne's nominated too. Silence, then, I don't know if I should go. If Anne wins, do I sit there and clap in front of 500 people? And if you win, are you going to let Anne take that moment from you because you're scared? Do you think I should go? You built Mesa from $847 and my biscuits. You served 3,600 people. You deserve to be in that room. I closed my eyes. Okay, I'll go. On January 10th, I called Louise back. Louise, it's May. I'll attend. Wonderful. You can bring 8 guests. You'll be at table 7. I stopped. Table 7. Yes, is that a problem? Table 7. The same table Alexander Monroe had sat at when he reviewed Anne's stolen dish in 2023. The same table where Anne had lied to a critic and claimed my work as hers. No, I said. It's perfect. Great. Black tie. March 15th, 6:30 p.m. We'll send a formal invitation. I hung up and stared at my phone. 9 weeks, 63 days. Over the next 4 days, I made a list of 8 guests. June Crawford, my mentor and neighbor, the woman who'd saved me when I had $847 left. Martha Wilson, 82 years old, my first Mesa client, wheelchair-bound and needing accessible seating. James Thornton, owner of Blue Bicycle Books, who'd hosted my very first pop-up in his courtyard. Jane Mitchell, who owned the yoga studio where I'd hosted my second event. Michael Richmond, the community garden director who'd supported Mesa from the beginning. Marcus, my former Etoile co-worker who'd quit to volunteer with Mesa and had witnessed my entire journey. Alexander Monroe, the food critic from the Charleston Post and Courier who'd reviewed Memoria de Mama and was now an ally. And Mrs. Dorothy Hayes June's church friend and a regular Mesa elder client who came to every pop-up she could afford. I sent emails to each of them. Everyone said yes. Marcus texted me on January 14th. Who's Anne bringing? I thought about it. Her parents, Tyler maybe, Kay Williams, Henri Laurent, probably investors. Power of position versus power of heart. Exactly. On January 15th, I went to Nordstrom Rack with June. Budget $150. I didn't want to overspend. I tried on 7 dresses. Too tight, too flashy, too cheap looking, too long. Then I found it. Deep burgundy, not navy, not black. Midi length. Elegant but modest. Marked down from $249 to $127. I stepped out of the fitting room. June looked up from her phone and smiled. You look beautiful. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. I'm not used to wearing dresses like this. You deserve to stand on that stage. I bought the dress. The cashier folded it carefully, wrapped it in tissue paper, slid it into a garment bag. Special occasion, she asked. I'm nominated for an award. Congratulations, you're going to look amazing. I carried the bag to my car. It was the first time a stranger had congratulated me for an accomplishment without knowing who I was. That night I hung the dress in my closet. I texted Marcus. 9 weeks, 63 days. I'm going to sit in the same room as Anne, Mom, and Dad, and I'm not going to break. He replied immediately. You won't be alone. We'll be there. I sat on my couch and opened my laptop. I clicked on the folder labeled Evidence. 19 emails. The health department report from March 2024. The anonymous complaint, the 0 violations. Screenshots, testimonials, receipts. I thought if Anne wins, I'll clap, but if I win, I'll tell the truth. On January 20th, I got a text from an unknown number. Congrats on the nomination. Hope you're ready to lose. Again. I stared at the screen. Anne. I didn't reply. I didn't block the number. I just set my phone down and looked at the burgundy dress hanging in my closet. You want war, I thought. You'll get it. 24 hours before the gala, my sister made one final attempt to destroy me. She failed, but she left evidence. I spent the afternoon of March 14th at Pearl District Art Gallery on King Street, setting up for what would be Mesa's last pop-up before the Rising Star ceremony. 25 guests. A spring menu butternut squash soup with brown butter sage and sourdough croutons, pan-seared salmon with lemon dill risotto, and roasted asparagus. Chocolate pot de creme with sea salt and whipped cream. Marcus arrived at 3 to help me prep. We worked in the gallery's small back kitchen, a portable setup. 2 burners, 1 oven, but we'd done more with less. At 5:30, I felt it. That crawling unease at the back of my neck, the sense that something was wrong even though nothing looked wrong. Marcus. I said, do you feel weird about tonight? He looked up from dicing shallots. Weird how, I don't know, like something's about to happen.
You're nervous about tomorrow, he said, and that's all.
Maybe. But I couldn't shake it. At 7, the guests arrived. 25 people, most of them regulars, Mrs. Hayes Martha in her wheelchair, a few new faces I recognized from Instagram. They sat at long communal tables under white gallery lights, talking quietly, smiling. I served the soup at 7:15. The room smelled like sage and butter. Everything felt right. And then at 8:17, someone knocked on the door, hard. I opened it. 2 people stood on the sidewalk, both wearing badges. The man was in his 50s, gray hair, tired eyes, a clipboard in his hand. The woman was younger, maybe 42, holding a tablet. Good evening, the man said. I'm Harold Foster, Charleston County Health Department. This is Janet Thompson, Building Inspection. We received a complaint about an unlicensed food service operation at this address. Are you the operator? My stomach dropped. Yes, May Sullivan, Mesa LLC, we're licensed. May I see your permits? I went to my bag and pulled out a folder. LLC certificate, food handler's permit, event liability insurance, venue rental agreement. I handed them over. Harold and Janet reviewed them carefully, slowly, while 25 guests sat in silence, soup cooling in their bowls, watching. 10 minutes. That's how long it took for them to verify that everything was legal. "All right," Harold said finally. "Everything checks out, but we still need to do a full inspection. Health code requires it when there's a complaint." "Of course," I said. They walked into the kitchen. Marcus stepped aside, arms crossed, jaw tight. Harold checked everything. Food temperatures correct. Cross-contamination protocols excellent. Hand washing station present. Food storage proper. He made notes on his clipboard, nodding occasionally. Janet checked the building. Occupancy limit 25 guests room. Capacity 40. Fire exits clear. ADA compliance accessible restrooms. Wheelchair seating available. At 8:50, Harold came back to me. "Miss Sullivan," he said, "everything's in order. Better than most restaurants I inspect, honestly." I exhaled. "Then why are you here?" "Anonymous complaint. Came in at 4:47 p.m. Caller claimed you were operating without permits and posing a public health risk." "Who called?" "Block number. But the caller knew your exact address and event time. Someone had very specific information." I looked at Marcus. He looked back at me. We both knew. "Can I get a copy of the report?" I asked. Harold raised an eyebrow. "That's an unusual request, but sure, you passed. 0 violations." He pulled a form from his clipboard, signed it, handed it to me. Charleston County Health Department. Inspection report. March 14th, 2025, 8:17 p.m. Result. No violations notes. All permits current and valid. Kitchen exceeds safety standards. Anonymous complaint appears baseless and likely malicious. I stared at the word malicious. "Thank you," I said. Harold and Janet left. The guests clapped not for the food, but for me for surviving whatever that was. I smiled, served the salmon, pretended everything was fine. But my hands were shaking. After the last guest left at 10, Marcus helped me clean up. We didn't talk much. We both knew what had happened. We just didn't say it out loud. I got home at 10:15. I went straight to my laptop and opened the folder labeled Evidence. 19 emails from my family spanning May 2023 to November 2024. Screenshots of Anne's Instagram posts claiming dishes I'd created. Witness statements from Marcus and Alexander Monroe. And now a new file. I scanned Harold's report and saved it as health_dept_report_March_14_2025.pdf. I opened a new document, gala_speech_draft.doc. I typed an outline. Part 1. My story. Getting fired. Getting blacklisted. Building Mesa from $847. Part 2. The evidence. Emails. Health Department report. Witness testimony. Part 3. The truth about Memoria de Mama, who really created it, who stole it. Part 4. The message. Empowerment. Boundaries. Justice. I saved the file. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I texted Marcus. "Bring recording equipment to the gala tomorrow and a camera. I need documentation." 3 dots appeared. Then, "What are you going to do?" "Justice." At 11:30, I was in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My phone lit up. A text from a number I recognized, Tyler, Anne's husband. I opened it. "May, it's Tyler. I need to tell you something. I made the call today. I called the health department. Anne made me do it. She saw a post on Instagram this afternoon. One of your guests tagged Pearl District. She panicked. She called me and said if you won tomorrow, everything we built would collapse. She told me to make an anonymous report. I used a voice changer app, called at 4:47 p.m. I'm sorry. I also sent you those emails in December, the 19 PDFs. I couldn't keep lying. I can't do this anymore. Good luck tomorrow." I read it 3 times. Then I replied, "Thank you for the truth." 3 dots. "She doesn't know I told you. Please don't mention me tomorrow." I thought about it. Then I typed, "I won't mention you, but she'll know someone did." I set my phone down. I looked at the burgundy dress hanging in my closet, the folder on my laptop, the health department report with the word malicious circled in my mind. Tomorrow at Magnolia Plantation in front of 500 people, my sister and I would sit in the same room. and one of us would win. But no matter who won, I was going to tell the truth. March 15th, 2025, 5:45 p.m. I stepped out of June's 2012 Honda Civic in a $127 dress, carrying 2 years of evidence in a burgundy clutch. The valet looked at June's car, dented bumper, faded paint, and then at me. I wasn't used to this. Magnolia Plantation sprawled in front of us, 200-year-old oak trees draped in Spanish moss gardens, lit with string lights, a grand ballroom glowing through tall windows. People in black ties stepped out of luxury cars. I felt like I'd walked onto the wrong set. "June," I said, my voice tight, "I don't belong here." She turned to me, her purple silk Vietnamese dress catching the light. "You belong anywhere you want to be." Martha, in her wheelchair beside us, reached for my hand. "You earned this, May." I nodded, even though I didn't believe it yet. We walked the red carpet. Photographers snapped photos. I smiled, clutch pressed against my ribs, feeling the weight of my evidence inside. At 6, we entered the grand ballroom. 500 people, 60 tables, a stage at the front with a massive projector screen, chandeliers, a live jazz band playing softly in the corner, champagne on silver trays. I'd never been in a room like this. I found table 7 on the right side near the stage, but not too close. Good view, not conspicuous. My 8 guests were already there. June sat down beside me, adjusting her dress. Martha's wheelchair fit perfectly at the end of the table. Marcus waved from across his phone, already out ready to record. James Thornton from Blue Bicycle Books wore a bow tie. Jane and Michael, the yoga studio owner and garden director, looked nervous but excited. Alexander Monroe, the food critic, nodded at me with a small smile. Mrs. Dorothy Hayes. June's church friend squeezed my shoulder. "We're so proud of you, honey." I sat down. My hands were shaking. I set the clutch on the table right in front of me. At 6:15, I looked across the room. Table 3, front row, center. Anne. She wore a navy sequin gown, custom designed, probably over $2,000. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked like she belonged here, like she'd always belonged here. Beside her sat our mother, Carol, in a black evening gown, her face carefully neutral. Our father, Paul, in a tuxedo, looking uncomfortable. Tyler Ann's husband staring at his lap. Kay Williams, the Etoile manager. A man I didn't recognize, probably an investor. A woman in a red dress taking notes, Nicole Morgan, Anne's PR representative, I guessed. And Henri Laurent, Anne's mentor, the Instagram chef with 347,000 followers. Anne glanced across the room. Our eyes met. I held her gaze. She looked away first. At 6:30, my father stood up from table 3 and walked toward me. My stomach tightened. June tensed beside me. He stopped at the edge of table 7. "May, can we talk?" "Here's fine," I said. My voice was flat. He looked around at my guests, then back at me. "I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. Your nomination, Mesa, everything you've built." I stared at him. 22 months. 22 months since he'd refused to lend me $2,500 when I had $847 left. 22 months since he'd helped Anne destroy me. 22 months, I said quietly. "You didn't call. You didn't text. You gave Anne $95,000 and helped her blacklist me from every restaurant in Charleston. And now you're proud." His face crumpled. "May, I read the emails, Dad. All 19 of them. I know you're on the board of the Culinary Association. I know you lobbied for Anne. I know you tried to make sure I wasn't nominated." He looked down. "I'm sorry." "Not yet," I said. "Maybe never." He stood there for a moment, then walked back to table 3. June squeezed my hand under the table. At 6:45, I excused myself to the restroom. I needed air. I needed to breathe. I pushed open the door to the women's lounge, marble counters, gold fixtures, soft lighting. My mother was standing by the mirror phone to her ear. "Anne's the obvious choice," she was saying. "She has a brick-and-mortar restaurant, 5-star reviews, a real business. May's just pop-ups." I stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind me. My mother turned. Her face went pale. She lowered the phone. "May, Mom." She hung up. "I didn't know you were November 28th, 2024, I said. "You and Dad lobbied Louise Reynolds to make sure Anne won. You told her May's pop-ups weren't sustainable. You said it would be awkward if both of us were nominated. I took a step closer. I know everything. She stared at me, mouth slightly open, unable to speak. I have the emails, I said, all of them. I turned and walked out. Back at table 7, I sat down. My hands were still shaking. Marcus leaned over. You okay? No, I said. But I will be. At 7:10, the lights dimmed. The jazz band stopped. A spotlight hit the stage. A man in a tuxedo stepped up to the microphone. Good evening, everyone. I'm James Pemberton, and welcome to the 2025 Southern Culinary Awards. Applause. 500 people clapping. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. June reached over and took my hand. Marcus had his phone out recording. Tonight, James continued, we celebrate excellence in Southern cuisine, and we're honored to present the Rising Star Chef Award to one of 4 extraordinary finalists. The screen behind him lit up. A photo appeared, a man in his 40s standing in a modern kitchen. Chef David Heirloom. Applause. Another photo, a woman in chef white smiling. Chef Renee Thompson, low tide. More applause. Then the screen changed. Anne, standing in Etoile's dining room holding a plate. The dish on the screen was unmistakable. My dish. Memoria de Mama. 17 ingredients. 45 minutes of stirring. My grandmother's recipe. Anne Sullivan, James said. Etoile. For her groundbreaking work redefining Charleston cuisine with dishes like Memoria de Mama. Table 3 erupted. Applause. Whistles. Henri Laurent stood up clapping. Anne rose from her seat, waving gracefully, smiling like she'd already won. I sat frozen, staring at the screen, at my dish, under her name. Then the screen changed again. A photo of me. Not in a kitchen, not holding a plate, just me sitting at a table with Mrs. Hayes, both of us laughing bowls of soup in front of us. May Sullivan, James said. Mesa. For her work serving 3,600 people last year through intimate pop-up dinners without social media, creating true community impact. The room exploded. People stood. Not just table 7, dozens of tables. A standing ovation. I sat there stunned, unable to move. June pulled me to my feet. Martha clapped from her wheelchair. Marcus was recording, grinning. Alexander Monroe stood nodding at me with respect. I looked across the room. Anne was still standing, but she wasn't smiling anymore. Her face had gone hard, tight. She stared at me, and I stared back. 7 minutes. That was the amount of time it took for my life to change. Again. The lights dimmed at exactly 7:45, and the murmur of 500 guests softened into silence. James Pemberton stood at the podium in a charcoal tuxedo, his silver hair catching the spotlight as he adjusted the microphone. Behind him, the projection screen displayed 4 names in elegant serif font against a backdrop of magnolia blossoms. May Sullivan, Anne Sullivan, David, Renee Thompson. My stomach twisted. James began, his voice warm and measured. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we honor not just culinary excellence, but the heart behind every plate. Our panel of judges spent 6 months conducting anonymous visits to each finalist's establishment. They evaluated 4 criteria: excellence in cuisine creativity and innovation, community impact, and sustainable vision. He paused, letting the words settle over the room. These are not buzzwords. They are the pillars of what we believe the future of Southern food should be built upon. I felt June's hand grip mine under the white tablecloth, her knuckles pressing into my palm so hard it hurt. At table 7, Martha dabbed her eyes with a linen napkin before anyone had even been announced. Marcus leaned forward, his phone already recording. Across the ballroom at table 3, Anne sat perfectly still in her emerald Dior gown. Her posture, flawless shoulders, back chin, tilted slightly upward. Carol clutched her beaded purse. Paul stared straight ahead, jaw-tight hands folded. Tyler sat motionless beside Anne. At 7:47, the cameras began their slow pan across the ballroom, and a giant monitor to the left of the stage showed each nominee's reaction in real time. David, 3 tables to my right, offered a nervous laugh and tugged at his bow tie. Renee Thompson closed her eyes and pressed her hands together as if praying. Anne leaned back in her chair, one arm draped casually over the armrest, her face serene and certain, as if she had already been told she'd won. Then the camera found me. I inhaled sharply, my shoulders rising, my eyes wide and glassy. June squeezed my hand harder. The monitor showed it all, every flicker of doubt and hope and terror, and I hated how exposed I felt. James continued. Each of our 4 finalists represents a different philosophy of Southern cuisine. David reimagines low-country classics through Korean technique. Renee Thompson champions zero-waste farm-to-table dining. Anne Sullivan brings Parisian elegance to Charleston's fine dining scene. He paused. And May Sullivan builds community through intimate story-driven meals, proving that the most radical act a chef can perform in 2025 is to simply care. My breath caught. Louise Reynolds stepped forward, holding a golden envelope sealed with crimson wax. The room fell so silent I could hear the rustle of her silk dress, the faint hum of air conditioning, the rapid thud of my own heartbeat. She broke the seal with a small silver knife and unfolded the card inside. Before I announced the winner, she said, "I want to share what our lead judge wrote in her final evaluation." She lifted the card. This year's rising star didn't chase fame. She didn't advertise. She didn't perform for cameras or critics. She simply fed people, 3,600 of them, one intimate dinner at a time. She built a business with no debt, no investors, and a 68% repeat guest rate that speaks louder than any review ever could. Martha gasped. Marcus whispered, "That's you, May." At table 3, Carol's hand flew to her mouth. Paul's eyes glistened. Anne's confident posture faltered for half a second, her shoulders tensing. Louise looked up. The 2025 Charleston Culinary Festival Rising Star Award goes to May Sullivan, Mesa. 7:51. Table 7 erupted. June shouted, "Yes!" and threw her arms around me. Martha burst into tears, covering her face. Marcus jumped to his feet, clapping so hard his chair tipped over. James Thornton whistled. Alexander Monroe stood applauding with his hands raised. The entire ballroom rose in a wave, the applause rolling through the room in deafening waves. I sat frozen, staring at the stage as if it were a mirage. I turned toward table 3. Anne sat frozen, her face pale, every trace of confidence drained. Her mouth was slightly open, her eyes wide and glassy. Carol had both hands over her mouth, tears streaming. Paul was weeping openly, his shoulders shaking. Tyler was the only one clapping slow, deliberate, his eyes locked on mine. The spotlight swung to our table, blinding and hot. June pushed me gently. "Go, baby, go." My legs felt like water as I stood. The applause grew louder, deafening. I walked toward the stage in my $127 burgundy dress, which suddenly felt like armor. As I passed table 3, Anne's eyes met mine. For 1 second, everything else disappeared. Her jaw was set, her hands gripping the table edge so hard her knuckles were white. I didn't smile, I didn't nod, I just kept walking. Paul stood. "Dad is proud of you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm proud of you. I didn't stop. I couldn't." Louise handed me the crystal trophy, a flame etched into glass, surprisingly heavy. James Pemberton shook my hand and stepped aside. The podium felt impossibly tall. 500 faces looked up at me. The cameras blinked red. Marcus held his phone steady. June was still standing, tears streaming. And Anne was staring at the stage with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Fear. I placed the trophy on the podium and reached into my clutch. Inside was a folded piece of paper, the inspection report from 2 nights ago. I unfolded it slowly. The microphone picked up the soft crinkle of paper. The room waited. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "Thank you to the judges, to Louise, to everyone who believed in Mesa." I paused. But before I continue, I need to say something I should have said 2 years ago. A ripple of confusion passed through the audience. At table 3, Anne's eyes widened. Carol grabbed Paul's arm. Tyler sat very still. I lifted the health department report. "I have evidence of a sabotage attempt made against me 48 hours ago. An anonymous call to the Charleston Health Department filed at 4:47 p.m. on March 14th, claiming I was operating an illegal food service." Gasps erupted. Phones came out. Marcus's camera never wavered. Anne stood her chair, scraping loudly. May, don't! Anne, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. Sit down, I'm not finished. Before I tell you the full story, before I reveal every lie, every stolen dish, every email I need to know you're still here. Comment 847 below, that's how much money I had left when my family abandoned me. And just so you know, this story contains some fictionalized elements for impact. If that's not for you, feel free to stop now. I fired my sister. Those were Anne's words. But let me tell you what really happened on May 18th, 2023. The room held its breath. Anne stood frozen, her emerald gown catching the spotlight. I didn't look at her. I looked at the 500 faces staring up at me at the cameras, blinking red at Marcus filming from table 7. The projection screen behind me flickered to life, displaying the elegant cursive logo of Étoile. I worked for my sister for 6 years. I said, my voice steady and amplified across the ballroom. 6 years of 16-hour days, burns, cuts, and missed holidays. 6 years building someone else's dream while mine gathered dust. I paused. And on May 18th, 2023, she called me into her office and fired me. No severance. No explanation beyond reliability concerns. Just a cardboard box and the door. A ripple of shock passed through the audience. At table 3, Carol's hand flew to her mouth. Paul kept his head bowed, shoulders shaking. I walked out with $2,263 in my bank account and nowhere to go. I continued. No family to turn to, no safety net, nothing. The words came easily now, each one a stone I'd carried for 2 years and was finally setting down. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 5 weeks earlier. The screen changed. A photograph appeared, golden empanadas, surrounded by vibrant chimichurri sauce, garnished with edible flowers. The dish glowed under professional lighting, beautiful and heartbreaking. This is Memoria de Mama, I said quietly. My grandmother Rosa's recipe, 17 ingredients passed down through generations, which I created and perfected for weeks. My throat tightened. Every step was a story, her story, my story. And on April 13th, 2023, my sister told a food critic it was hers. The room erupted in murmurs. I raised my hand and silence fell. Alexander Monroe of the Charleston Post and Courier published a glowing review crediting Anne Sullivan as the creator of Memoria de Mama. I turned slightly, finding Alexander at table 7. He was standing, his face pale. Alexander, you were there. You interviewed her. Tell them. Alexander's voice carried across the ballroom. Anne told me she created the dish from her grandmother's recipes. She described every ingredient, every technique. He paused, jaw tight. She lied to me. I published that lie, and I'm sorry, May. The apology hit me harder than I expected. I nodded once. Thank you, Alexander. I know you didn't know. I looked at Anne. She was still standing, her face bloodless. But she did. The screen changed again, showing a list of 14 restaurant names in white text, The Ordinary, Husk, Figure Hall's Chop House, Leon's Oyster Shop, and 9 others. I read them aloud, one by one. These are the 14 restaurants that rejected me in 3 weeks after I was fired, I said. 14 places where I applied for any position they had. 14 places that said no. I paused. For weeks, I didn't understand why. My resume was solid. My experience was strong. So why? I pulled a folded paper from my clutch. On May 25th, 2023, I got an answer. Chef Thomas Reed at The Ordinary told me there was a reliability issue. When I pressed him, he admitted someone had called 3 days earlier claiming I had substance abuse problems, warning him I was dangerous to hire. Gasps erupted across the ballroom. At table 3, Tyler's face went rigid. Carol clutched Paul's arm. Anne swayed slightly. It wasn't just Chef Reed. I continued, my voice rising. 14 chefs, 14 calls from the same number, all painting the same picture. May Sullivan is unreliable, unstable a liability. I looked directly at Anne. My sister destroyed my reputation in 72 hours. The silence was deafening. I folded the paper and set it on the podium. By mid-June, I was down to $847, as I mentioned earlier, with rent overdue and nowhere to turn. I applied for dishwashing jobs, begged for any position, cried in my car after the 14th rejection. My voice cracked, and when I asked my father for a loan, $2,500 to survive, he said no. I turned toward table 3, where Paul was openly weeping. Carol sat rigid, arms crossed. He said no to teach me self-reliance, I said quietly. That same year, my parents gave my sister tens of thousands of dollars to expand Etoile. New equipment, new staff, new marketing. I let the numbers sink in. $2,500 was too much to help me survive, but tens of thousands to help Anne thrive. That was just family support. Paul's sobs were audible. Carol didn't move. I'm not telling you this for sympathy, I said. I'm telling you because someone saved me. Someone who had no reason to care but did. I gestured toward June Crawford at table 7, tears streaming down her face. June Crawford, 70 years old. She heard me crying through the wall and knocked with butter cookies and a job offer. $25 per meal. Cook for her twice a week because her knees hurt. June pressed both hands to her heart, mouthing, "I love you." I took that job, I said, and with $315 I registered Mesa LLC on August 30th, 2023. No investors, no loans, no family money. Just me, a borrowed kitchen, and a belief that food could mean something more than fame. The screen displayed Mesa's growth, 3,600 guests in 18 months, 68% repeat, rate 0 debt, 0 advertising. I built Mesa in silence, I said. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't need applause. I needed connection. I needed to prove that food isn't about performance or prestige. It's about people. It's about sitting across from someone and saying, "I see you. You matter." Applause began to swell, but I raised my hand. But while I was building Mesa, while I was feeding strangers and earning back my dignity, my sister was still trying to destroy me. I picked up the health department report and held it high. 2 nights ago, someone made an anonymous health complaint against me. The inspectors found 0 violations and labeled the call malicious. Anne tried to speak. "May I sit down?" The command cut through the room like a blade. Anne sat her legs, giving out, her face crumbling. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a thick stack of papers bound with a black clip. 19 pages, 19 emails. "This isn't just my story," I said, my voice breaking. "It's the story of everyone erased by someone they loved. Everyone blacklisted, gaslit, silenced." I held up the emails. These are 19 emails between my sister, my mother, and my father, planning how to eliminate me from the industry for 14 months. Strategizing, justifying, celebrating. The ballroom was silent except for cameras. I looked out at 500 faces, strangers and friends, critics and chefs. "Do you want to hear them?" I asked. The answer came as one voice, a roar that shook the chandeliers. "Yes." I nodded slowly, my hands steady as I opened the first page. "Then listen. 19 emails. I'm only going to read 5. That's all you need to hear." The stack of papers felt impossibly heavy in my hands. I separated the first page and held it up so the cameras could see the time-stamped header. The projection screen behind me flickered, displaying the email in large font for the entire ballroom to read. "This is email number 1. I said, my voice steady. Sent May 18th, 2023 at 11:47 p.m., the night I was fired. From Anne Sullivan to Carol and Paul Sullivan. Subject, May situation. Action plan. I read aloud each word, deliberate. "I fired May today. It was necessary. We need to ensure she doesn't embarrass the family by working at competitor restaurants and bad-mouthing Etoile. I've started making calls to key chefs in Charleston. Thomas Reed at The Ordinary is already on board. I'll handle the rest this week. This is for the best. She wasn't cut out for this level of work anyway." Gasps erupted across the ballroom. At table 3, Anne's face went completely white. Paul covered his face with both hands. Tyler stared at the tablecloth. I set the first page down and picked up the second. Email number 2. Sent June 3, 2023, from Carol Sullivan to Paul Sullivan. Subject, May asking for money. Paul, do not send her that money. She needs to learn self-reliance. We've coddled her long enough. Anne is building something real, a legacy. May needs to figure out her own path without dragging us down. If you send her anything, you're enabling her failure. We agreed on this. Paul's sobs echoed across the silent ballroom. Carol sat frozen, her face flushed, deep red arms wrapped around herself. Email number 3. I continued. Sent June 15th, 2023, the day I had $847 left. From Paul Sullivan to Carol Sullivan. Subject, May. I read his words. Carol, I saw May at the Harris Teeter today. She's lost weight. She looks exhausted, worn down. She didn't see me. Are we sure this is the right approach? Maybe just a small loan to help her get on her feet. I paused, then read Carol's reply. She's manipulating you, Paul. She always does this, plays the victim when things get hard. Stay strong. This is what tough love looks like. She'll thank us later. Paul's head dropped to the table, his shoulders shaking violently. Carol didn't move, didn't look at anyone. Email number 4. I said, my voice hardening. September 10th, 2023, Paul to Carol. I heard through a friend that May is cooking for elderly people in North Charleston. Small dinners, nothing professional. She's surviving, but barely. Should we reach out? Carol's reply, no, let her build character. Anne started from nothing too. I looked up. That last line is a lie. Anne didn't start from nothing. She started with tens of thousands of dollars in family investment paid culinary school, and every connection our parents could provide. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. At table 7, June was crying openly. Marcus had clenched his hands into fists. And finally, email number 5, I said. Sent November 3rd, 2023, from Carol Sullivan to Louise Reynolds, director of the Charleston Culinary Festival. Subject, Rising Star nomination, Anne Sullivan. I read slowly. Dear Louise, I wanted to follow up on our conversation last week. Anne has transformed Charleston's fine dining scene with her innovative approach and original recipes. Étoile has been featured in Southern Living and Food and Wine. I believe she would be an excellent candidate for the Rising Star Award. The Sullivan family has deep roots in Charleston's culinary community. The ballroom exploded in outrage. I raised my hand for silence. Louise, I said, turning toward her, would you like to respond? Louise Reynolds stepped forward, her face tight with anger. Carol Sullivan called me 7 times between November and January, lobbying for Anne's nomination. I told her repeatedly that judges make decisions independently. She persisted. She sent flowers, dinner invitations. Louise's voice shook. I declined every time. I want to make clear Anne's nomination was legitimate, decided by an independent panel. Her mother's interference had no impact on the judge's decision. Thank you, Louise, I said. Louise nodded and stepped back. I looked out at the audience. Alexander Monroe already confirmed Anne lied about Memoria de Mama, but he's not the only witness. At table 7, Marcus stood. I worked at Étoile for 8 months last year. I watched Anne take credit for May's recipes, plating ideas, menu innovations for 6 years. May would create something beautiful and Anne would present it as her own, every single time. I stayed silent because I needed the job, but I'm not staying silent anymore. The applause for Marcus was immediate and thunderous. I held up the inspection report. The screen displayed it 0 violations complaint labeled malicious. As documented here, someone made an anonymous call at 4:47 p.m. on March 14th using a voice changer. I paused. But I know who made that call. I turned toward table 3. Tyler Harrison, Anne's husband. He confessed to me yesterday. He made the call under Anne's instruction. The ballroom erupted. Tyler didn't move. Anne turned to him, her whisper furious. You told her. The table microphone was still live. Her words echoed across the ballroom. Gasps turned to outrage. Anne, I said, stand up. She didn't move. Stand up and face these people. Face me. Slowly trembling, Anne stood. Her emerald gown caught the spotlight, but there was no elegance left. She looked small, trapped, terrified. "Did you steal Memoria de Mama?" I asked. Silence. "Did you blacklist me from 14 restaurants?" Silence. "Did you order your husband to sabotage my dinner 2 nights ago?" Silence. Tears streamed down her face. Then, thinking her microphone was off, she leaned toward Tyler and whispered, "You were supposed to stay small." The microphone caught it, amplified it, broadcast it to 500 people. The ballroom erupted. Phones came out recording everything. Anne's face crumpled as she realized what she'd said. I stepped back, letting her words hang in the air. Then I returned to the microphone. "I don't need your permission to exist," I said quietly. "I don't need your approval to succeed, and I don't need your family to tell me I'm enough." Anne collapsed into her chair, face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. At table 4, Henri Laurent, Anne's culinary school mentor, stood slowly. He shook his head in profound disappointment and walked toward the exit. The ballroom watched in silence. At table 3, Carol grabbed her purse and left without looking back. Her heels clicked sharply against marble, echoing through the silent room. Paul stayed. He sat alone, weeping openly, hands covering his face. Tyler remained seated, staring at his hands, motionless. I turned to the audience, to the 500 strangers and friends who had witnessed everything. "This is for everyone who's been erased," I said, my voice breaking. "Everyone who's been told they're not good enough, not worth investing in. You are not alone. You are enough. And your story matters." For 2 beats, the ballroom was silent. Then June Crawford stood, hands raised high, applauding, with everything she had. Then Martha, then Marcus, then Alexander Monroe. Then the entire ballroom, all 500 guests, rose to their feet. The applause was deafening, rolling through the room in waves. I counted silently 10 seconds, 20, 30, 40. 47 seconds of continuous applause, cameras, flashing people, cheering, crying. I picked up the crystal trophy and held it against my chest, feeling its weight, its solidity, its reality. I looked at table 7. June was crying, hands pressed to her heart. Martha was clapping with hands above her head. Marcus was filming, tears streaming down his face. I looked at table 3. Anne sat, broken face hidden. Tyler stared at nothing. Paul wept alone. I closed my eyes and let the applause wash over me. When I opened them, I was no longer afraid. The applause ended. The cameras stopped. And then there was silence, the kind of silence that comes after an explosion. My legs were shaking as I stepped off the stage, the crystal trophy still clutched against my chest like a shield. Louise Reynolds appeared at my elbow, her face a mixture of concern and something else I couldn't quite name. Awe, maybe. Or fear. "May," she said, gently touching my arm, "are you okay? That was extraordinary." I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came. I just shook my head. "I need air," I finally managed. "I can't do interviews right now. I can't—" "Of course," Louise said quickly. "Take your time. I'll handle the media. You don't owe anyone anything tonight." Before I could respond, June appeared, wrapping her arms around me so tightly I thought I might break. "You were magnificent, baby," she whispered into my hair. "I'm so proud of you." I clung to her, the trophy pressed between us, trying not to cry. I'd already cried enough for one night, for one lifetime. By the time I made it back to table 7 at 8:10, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Strangers approached me. People I'd never met, faces I didn't recognize, pressing my hand, thanking me through tears. "You gave me the courage to stand up to my brother," one woman said, her voice breaking. "He's been taking credit for my work for 5 years. My boss has been stealing my designs," another person added. "I've been too afraid to speak up, but after tonight, thank you." I nodded numbly, overwhelmed by the weight of their gratitude, the sudden realization that what I'd said on that stage wasn't just about me anymore. Marcus grabbed my arm and shoved his phone in front of my face. "May Sullivan is trending on Twitter," he said, his voice urgent and excited. 12,000 mentions in the last 8 minutes. I stared at the screen, watching tweets scroll past faster than I could read them. Support, outrage at Anne, praise for my bravery, calls for accountability. It was dizzying. "I can't process this," I whispered, pushing the phone away. At 8:15, my father appeared beside the table. His eyes were red and swollen, his face aged a decade in the span of an hour. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. "May," he said, his voice hoarse, I'm so sorry I failed you. I should have protected you, and instead I raised my hand, cutting him off. "Dad, I appreciate the apology, but I can't have this conversation right now, or maybe ever." "Please," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Let me explain." "If you want to talk to me again," I said firmly, "you need to go to family therapy. You need to understand what you did and why it was wrong. And then maybe in 6 months we can have this conversation." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand. I'll do it." "Good. Now please leave. I need to be with people who actually showed up for me." He turned and walked away, shoulders slumped, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, just a strange, hollow relief. At 8:20, my phone buzzed again. A missed call from Carol, then a voicemail notification. I hesitated, then put it on speaker so June could hear. Carol's voice was cold and furious, every word sharp as broken glass. "You humiliated this family tonight, May. You ruined your sister's career, dragged our name through the mud, all for your petty revenge. You're selfish, vindictive, and cruel. Don't ever contact me again." I stared at the phone for 3 seconds, then deleted the voicemail without responding. "Good girl," June said quietly. At 8:30, another text came through. This one from Anne. "I need to talk to you, alone. Parking garage level 3, please." Marcus saw it over my shoulder. "Don't go, it's not safe." "She's right," June said. "Don't give her the satisfaction." I stood handing June the trophy. "I need to do this, one last time. I need closure." "Then I'm coming with you," June insisted. "No," I said gently. "This is something I have to do alone." I found Anne at 8:47, leaning against a concrete pillar on the 3rd level of the parking garage. Her makeup was destroyed mascara streaking down her cheeks, her emerald Dior gown wrinkled and stained. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. "You destroyed me," she said. I stopped 6 feet away, keeping my distance. "No, you destroyed yourself. I just told the truth. You had no right to humiliate me like that in front of everyone," she spat. "I gave you a job. You fired me," I interrupted. "You blacklisted me. You tried to sabotage me 2 nights ago. Don't rewrite history now that you've been caught." "I was protecting the family." Anne sobbed. "Protecting Etoile." "You were protecting yourself. There's a difference." The garage echoed with the distant rumble of car engines, the hum of fluorescent lights. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Do you remember when we were kids?" I asked, my voice softening slightly. 9 and 13, we made empanadas in Abuela Rosa's kitchen. You taught me how to fold the dough." Anne looked up, surprised. "You were kind then," I continued. "You were my hero. What happened to that person?" Her face crumbled. "Mom happened. She told me there was only room for one successful daughter, that I had to choose support you or succeed myself." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I chose wrong. I know I chose wrong." My chest tightened, but I stayed firm. "That's not an excuse. Carol manipulated both of us, but I chose to break free. You chose to become her." "I'm sorry," Anne whispered. "I'm so sorry, May." "I know," I said, "but sorry doesn't undo 6 years of stolen credit. Sorry doesn't undo the blacklist. Sorry doesn't give me back the time I spent crying in my car wondering if I'd ever work again." Anne covered her face, her whole body shaking with sobs. "I don't hate you, Anne," I said quietly. "I pity you, because you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what you could have built if you'd been brave enough to be yourself." I turned and walked toward the elevator. Behind me, Anne's sobs echoed off the concrete walls, but I didn't look back. When I returned to table 7 at 8:55, Marcus met me with his phone. "Alexander Monroe just published an article. The Sullivan Sisters, A Tale of Two Chefs. It's everywhere. Turn off my notifications," I said, suddenly exhausted. "All of them. I don't want to see any of it tonight." Marcus nodded and took my phone, switching it to Do Not Disturb. I sat down beside June and leaned my head on her shoulder. "Can I just stay here with you, my real family?" June kissed the top of my head. "Baby, you're home." Later, driving through the dark streets of Charleston with the city lights blurring past my windows, my phone buzzed. An emergency contact override, a text from Tyler. I pulled over and read it. Anne checked into a hotel. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. She's completely broken. She needs help, professional help. I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better. We all failed you. I stared at the message for a long moment, then looked at the crystal trophy on the passenger seat. It caught the streetlight, glowing soft gold in the darkness. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I felt relief, like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for 2 years. I put the car in drive and headed home. The world moved fast after that night, but I slowed down, intentionally. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Good Morning America, Netflix, Food Network. They all use the same words, platform exposure opportunity. They all missed the point. I sat at my kitchen table with June on the 3rd day staring at 17 media requests. I didn't do this to become famous, I told her. I did it to be free. Then be free, June said. I declined every major outlet except one Charleston magazine. I'd tell my story once locally for the people who lived it with me. Then I was done. By late March, Etoile had closed, doors locked. March 28th. Bankruptcy filed April 2nd. Anne was admitted to Palmetto Behavioral Health for 30 days. A week later, her Instagram disappeared, 78,000 followers gone. Everything deleted. Digital silence. June asked how I felt. I said honestly. But not guilty. She made her choices. I made mine. I sent one text to Tyler. I hope she gets the help she needs. He replied, thank you. She does. The package arrived April 18th with no return address. Inside was a cloth-wrapped book that smelled like cinnamon and thyme. Grandmother Rosa's original recipe book. Handwritten in Spanish and English pages, stained with decades of use. Recipes for empanadas, panna cotta, chimichurri arroz con leche. Instructions in fading ink measurements in grams and cups and handfuls, and until it feels right. Tucked inside was a note on cream stationery. May. This belonged to your grandmother. It should have gone to you years ago. I'm sorry I kept it from you. I'm sorry for many things. Mom. I sat on my kitchen floor, clutching the book, and sobbed. Then I called my father, first contact since the gala. May. His voice shook. Tell Mom thank you. I managed. It means everything. He started crying. Can we talk, please? Not yet, I said, but maybe soon. On April 25th, I met them at Kudu Coffee. Carol looked smaller, older. Paul's hands shook, holding his coffee cup. We've been going to therapy twice a week, Carol said quietly. Good, I said. Keep going. Paul leaned forward. We want to rebuild, I interrupted gently. I need 6 months. 6 months of no contact while you focus on therapy and understanding what you did. Carol flinched but nodded. After 6 months we can talk, I continued. We can try, but I'm not promising reconciliation. I'm promising a conversation. That's more than we deserve, Paul said, his voice breaking. Yes, it is. We sat in silence, drinking coffee. When I stood to leave, I paused. I don't hate you. I just need to protect myself first. Walking out into April sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years. After the gala, strangers donated $47,000 to a GoFundMe Marcus set up without telling me. I stared at the number on my laptop screen at June's kitchen table. What are you going to do with it? June asked. I knew immediately. Grandma's table. The project launched in early May, free weekly meals for elderly residents in underserved North Charleston neighborhoods. I hired 3 people to help. Terrell, 42, formerly incarcerated 5 years clean, who told me nobody had given him a real chance since he was 20. Jasmine, 27, recovering addict culinary school dropout whose hands trembled, chopping onions but whose sauces were extraordinary. David, 55, recently homeless, who'd worked as a line cook for 20 years before losing everything. You're giving people second chances, June observed. Someone gave me one, I said. Mid-May, a venture capital firm offered me $1.2 million to franchise Mesa across the Southeast. I declined via email. Mesa isn't a business model, it's a philosophy. You can't franchise care. You just turned down $1 million, Marcus said, staring at me. I know, I said, and I've never felt richer. On May 20th, I hosted pop-up dinner number 147 at Blue Bicycle Books, where it all began. 18 guests, the same number as the first dinner. I plated lemon panna cotta for dessert, the same recipe from that nervous September night when Mesa was just an idea and a prayer. The guests laughed and shared stories and held hands across the table, and I realized this was what winning looked like. My phone buzzed twice during dessert. Paul, 3 months of therapy, learning a lot about control favoritism and failure. I hope we can talk soon. I miss you. And day 47 of sobriety and therapy. I'm sorry isn't enough, but I'm trying to become someone who deserves forgiveness. I don't expect you to respond. I just wanted you to know. I read both messages, then set my phone down. I didn't reply immediately, but I saved them both. And I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years, hope. Looking around the table at strangers becoming friends, at laughter echoing off brick walls at connection, happening in real time, I understood something fundamental. I didn't need my family's validation anymore. I only wanted a healthy relationship if we could build one. And if we couldn't, I'd survive that too. I won not because of the Rising Star Award. I won because I chose my life and lived it on my terms. That was the only victory that mattered. That night, I slept peacefully in my small apartment. My walls were covered with handwritten thank you cards from Mesa guests. You saved my life. I'm not lonely anymore. Thank you for seeing me. Grandmother Rosa's recipe book lay open on the kitchen counter to the empanada page stained and beloved. The crystal trophy sat on my bookshelf surrounded by cookbooks, no pedestal, no spotlight, just another object in a life well lived. No empire, just a table. And that was more than enough. And to you listening to this story, remember this. I spent 2 years believing God had abandoned me when Anne fired me and turned my parents against me. I cried, asking why he'd let family betrayal destroy me. But now I see his hand everywhere. When June knocked with butter cookies, that was God. When I scraped together just enough to register Mesa, that was God. When I held evidence of family revenge plotted for 14 months on that stage, that was God giving me strength I never knew I had. Family betrayal doesn't define you. Your response does. Don't be like me. Don't wait 2 years to set boundaries. Don't let guilt silence you when someone, even family, is destroying you. Speak up sooner. Ask for help sooner. Don't confuse loyalty with self-destruction. My advice, if someone blacklists you or gaslights you, document everything. Then walk away and build something they can never touch. Family revenge isn't about destroying them publicly. It's about building a life so authentic they can't compete. And when God closes the door on toxic relationships, don't pick the lock. That's my story. Messy, painful, but mine. Now I want to hear yours. Have you experienced family betrayal or family revenge? How did you survive? Drop your story in the comments. Your courage might save someone else. If this resonated, please share it and subscribe for more real-life lessons. Thank you for staying until the end. One final note, upcoming stories contain fictionalized elements for educational purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to explore other content. God bless you. Remember, no empire needed, just a table, that's enough.